Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. Ameer Sahib, we can begin whenever you're ready, Ameer Sahib. We're going to display the agenda now.
We're ready.
Ameer Sahib, if you can, I'll request you to host the session if that's okay.
Jazakallah. Recitation of the Holy Quran. Shahriyat Sarwar Sahib.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah.
Wa
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل أطيعوا الله وأطيعوا الرسول فإن تولوا فإنما عليه ما حمل وعليكم ما حملتم وإن تطيعوه تهتدوا وما على الرسول إلا البلاغ المبين. وعد الله الذين آمنوا منكم وعملوا الصالحات ليستخلفنهم في الأرض كما استخلف الذين من قبلهم وليمكنن لهم دينهم الذي ارتضى لهم وليبدلنهم من بعد خوفهم أمنا يعبدونني لا يشركون بي شيئا ومن كفر بعد ذلك فأولئك هم الفاسقون. وأقيموا الصلاة وآتوا الزكاة وأطيعوا الرسول لعلكم ترحمون. لا تحسبن الذين كفروا معجزين في الأرض ومأواهم النار لبئس المصير. I've just recited chapter 24, verses 55 to 58, and the English translation is as follows. I seek refuge with Allah from Satan the accursed. In the name of Allah, the most gracious and ever merciful. Say, obey Allah and obey the messenger. But if you turn away, then upon him is his burden, and upon you is your burden. And if you obey him, you will be rightly guided. And the messenger is not responsible, but for the plain delivery of the message. Allah has promised to those among you who believe and do good works that he will surely make them successors in the earth, as he made successors from among those who were before them, and that he will surely establish for them their religion, which he has chosen for them, and that he will surely give them in exchange security and peace after their fear. They will worship me, and they will not associate anything with me. Then whoso is ungrateful after that, they will be the rebellious. And observe prayer and give zakat and obey the messenger, that you may be shown mercy. Think not that those who disbelieve can frustrate our plan in the earth. Their abode is hell, and it is indeed an evil resort.
Jazakallah. And next is a hadith by Rashid Yusuf Sahib.
Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.
Wa alaikum salam.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammadan wa ala ali Muhammadan kama sallaita ala Ibrahima wa ala ali Ibrahima innaka hamidum majid. Allahumma barik ala Muhammadan wa ala ali Muhammadan kama barakta ala Ibrahima wa ala ali Ibrahima innaka hamidum majid. The Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is reported to have said, prophethood shall remain among you as long as God wills. He will bring about its end and follow it with Khilafat on the precepts of prophethood for as long as he wills, and then bring about its end. Kingship shall then follow to remain as long as God wills, and then come to an end. There shall then be monarchical despotism, which shall remain as long as God wills, and come to an end upon his decree. There will then emerge Khilafat on the precepts of prophethood. Then he remains silent. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadan wa ala ali Muhammadan wa barik wa sallim innaka hamidum majid. Jazakumullah sanal jazak.
Jazakallah. Just request to Majlis, if it is possible, I think it's a good idea to have the original version in Arabic of these to be recited and then the translation. Next is remarks by Sadr Majlis Khuddamul Ahmadiyya.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. First, let me welcome Ameer Jama'at USA, Sahibzada Mirza Maghfur Ahmad Sahib, for joining us today, and all of the Khuddam and Atfal and others who have joined us. One of the main objectives of Majlis Khuddam al-Ahmadiyya is to safeguard Khilafat, which is the reason why we're here today, and we wanted Majlis Khuddam al-Ahmadiyya to have this program today. Behind me, there's some lucky Waqf-e Khuddam who will get the opportunity to spend some time with Hazrat Khalifa al-Masih tomorrow, inshallah. These are the Waqf-e who are 15 to 22 years of age, and the Waqfat-e, the girls of 15 to 22, were able to meet Hazrat Khalifa al-Masih today. And we also have some Khuddam from various regional ijtima that are joining us today. We have in the southeast region, we have the Khuddam visiting from Atlanta. We have Khuddam from the East Region Ijtima from Willingboro who are there, and also the Khuddam from New York region who are in the Poconos having their Ijtima. So Jazakallah, and welcome to everyone who's there and who's online as well with us. We have about 400 participants online also. I was reminded recently by Murabbi Shamshad Nasir Sahib that the first time that the Khilafat Day was introduced or mentioned was at a Khuddam National Ijtima in 1956. And Hazrat Muslim Maud officially announced Khilafat Day. So that is part of the reason why we wanted as a Majlis to hold Khilafat Day. And I want to read the words of Hazrat Muslim Maud. Always remember the blessings of Khilafat. To remember something, nations have historically allocated a day to commemorate it. For instance, the Shiites march in processions once a year so that the martyrdom of Hazrat Imam Hussein is not forgotten. Similarly, I advise the Khuddam to dedicate a day and celebrate it as Khilafat Day, wherein they should offer their gratitude to Allah the Almighty and revive history. It might be hard to find old newspaper, but Al-Fazl has recently retold the whole history. Hazrat Khalifatul Masih, the first arguments in support of Khilafat, and also the abuse hurled at him in return by the Peghamis. The Peghamis are the Ahmadiyya, Anjuman-e-Shaat, the Islam-e-Lahore, who deviated from the system of Khilafat. Such passages should be read out from these newspapers. If Khilafat Day is celebrated once a year, the younger generation will listen to them every year and eventually know them by heart. Continue holding these jalsas until the end of time so that the Jama'at never forgets the blessings and importance of Khilafat. The Khilafat of Jesus has been around for around 1900 years. May the Khilafat of the promised Messiah, alayhi salam, who is higher in rank than Jesus, remain for 10,000 years. This is only possible if you dedicate a day of the year for this purpose. I would also like to instruct the markas that, like Sirat al-Nabi Day, a day should be celebrated as Khilafat Day. The markas should advise the organizers of these jalsas as to what topics should be covered in speeches, what parts of Al-Fazl to be read out to the youth to make them aware of how Hazrat Khalifatul Masih I upheld the institution of Khilafat and how the Peghamis wrote in opposition. Those dreams and visions should be mentioned that Allah, the Almighty, vouchsafed to me well ahead of time and how he fulfilled each of those to show that his blessings are still with Khilafat. So after this, these instructions were given by Hazur, the Nazarat Islah Ishad, in consultation with the Jama'at, proposed that May 27th to be dedicated as Khilafat Day. So Jazakallah.
Next is the presentation, status of Khilafat, Vishan Ahmed Sahib.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah.
Wa alaikum assalam.
A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. I want to say Jazakallah to everyone for joining. Alhamdulillah, as respected Sayyid had mentioned, we have over 400 participants watching right now, and that number is continuously growing. So inshallah, I hope as the time passes, we'll have a larger number. Today, we've been given the objective to cover a very large and grand topic of Munsab-e-Khilafat, meaning the status of Khilafat. And to help us kind of go into this subject, I'm joined by our respected panelists, Mohtaram Sahib Tarbiyat, Ibrahim Chaudhry Sahib, and Rabbi Osama Rahman Sahib. Gentlemen, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. So I wanted to start off our conversation by reading a letter from our beloved Imam, Hazrat Khalifatul Masih Ayyadullah Ta'ala bin Nasr Aziz, that he wrote to the Jama'at on the centenary of Khilafat. In this letter, Hazur highlights what our personal character should be like. But before I read the excerpt from this letter, I want to make one point very clear, that today's webinar is just one very small step to a much larger goal. See, it's our responsibility, every one of us who are listening, to take this conversation and continue it at our local Majlis. We should discuss this topic with our fellow Khuddam and instill the importance of Khilafat in each of our hearts, inshallah. And so with that, I'll read the excerpt. Hazur writes, the extraordinary standards of sacrifice and complete transformation that occurred amongst the companions of the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was on account of their love for Allah and his Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that sprouted from their increasing firmness in faith, their love and care for each other, and the standard of their sacrifice of life, wealth, and time for the sake of their faith was matchless. These are the people who serve as our role models because they fulfilled their pledges and became the recipients of Allah's bounties and His grace. Today, you are not being asked to use the sword, nor to march forward into a battlefield and confront guns and missiles. You are asked to fulfill the obligations to Allah and His creation. Inculcate the spirit of sacrifice in the old and young. Set high standards in obedience to Nizam and Jama'at and Khilafat, and instill similar high standards in your wife and children. Because obedience is the cornerstone of discipline, and discipline is the foundation of a good structure. May Allah the Exalted enable us to promulgate this spirit and passion so that we can see the promises of the victory of Islam being fulfilled in our very own lives. Ameen. And so to get this conversation started, I want to first start off by bringing in Rabbi Usama Saib. Rabbi Saib, we're going to be touching on a lot of different aspects of Khilafat today, but just to get us started off and to set the tone of this conversation, can you define what Khilafat truly means?
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah. Yes, Qaid Sahib, this is, I believe, a very fundamental point for us to understand what is Khilafat, what does the Khalifa do, what is the role and responsibility at the end of the day of Khalifa. So what better way to answer this question than the word of God himself. And so let's look back towards that verse that was recited in the beginning, which is known as Untitled Chapter, so verse 56 of chapter 24. So in this verse, I'm not going to read the whole translation. I'm just going to bring out those 3 points to the surface, which deal with what does the Khalifa do. And so the first point that comes up is that they establish the religion, the faith, meaning Islam. So they establish the religion of Islam on the earth. The second thing that comes to the surface, the second point, is that the Khalifa changes fear, anxiety into peace of the nation of the believers. And the third thing, which is 2 things together, is that the Khalifa establishes the unity of God and the worship of the one God, and the Khalifa preaches against shirk, which is idolatry or the association of any partners with God Almighty.
Jazakallah for shedding light on that verse. It's like you said, it's very clear that Allah Ta'ala in this verse establishes that Khilafat is that light and tranquility of God on this earth, right, today. And we actually have a clip from the Friday sermon of beloved Hazur Ayyadullah Ta'ala bin Nasr Aziz, where he explains how the Khalifa will be the guide of today and what his role will be. So let's take a look at that.
फिर खिलाफत का मकसद हुकूकुल इबाद की अदायगी की तरफ भरपूर तवज्जो देना है, उन हुकूक को मनवाना और कायम करना और मुश्तरका कोशिश से उनकी अदायगी की कोशिश करना है। दीन को दुनिया पर मुकद्दम रखने के लिए अफराद जमात में ये रूह पैदा करना है, इनको तवज्जो दिलाना है कि दीन बहरहाल दुनिया से मुकद्दम रहना चाहिए और इसी में तुम्हारी बका है, इसी में तुम्हारी नस्लों की बका है। ये एक रूह फूंकना भी खिलाफत का काम है।
Jazakallah. In this clip, Hazuri Anwar Ayyadullah Ta'ala bin Nasr Aziz, he goes into the objective of Khilafat and how it's to inculcate, the Jama'at's attention towards fulfilling the rights owed to mankind, and to make sure that the Jama'at understands that to give precedence over their faith over all worldly matters. And I want to bring in Munsab into this discussion. Munsab, that's what we just discussed is a very enormous task for any person. And so I really just want to ask, how is that role being fulfilled today through Khilafat?
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. The 3 points that were just mentioned by Murabi Saab, we can focus on those. And if you look at the first point, which says Khilafat will establish the religion or the faith, And we can see that under Khilafat's guiding hand, the community has acquired a distinguished and eminent global identity. The whole world is well aware of its efforts in the fields of propagation of Islam, education, and its work for humanity. The community is held in esteem for publishing the Holy Quran and other Islamic literature. Today, with the grace of God, this community is well established in over 200 countries of the world, and its membership is in tens of millions and increasing every day. So we can now listen to this clip of how Allah Ta'ala establishing religion of Islam in this age through Hazrat Khalifa al-Masih Ta'ala bin Nasr al-Aziz.
In terms of tabligh and tarbiyah, I also wish to take this opportunity to remind all members of the Majlis Shura about the crucial importance of the publication and dissemination of the Holy Quran and all Jama'at literatures. In the past, there were times when we did not have adequate funds to print the Holy Quran or other books in the vast quantities. However, now with the grace of Allah, the Jama'at is printing hundreds of thousands of copies of books, magazines, and pamphlets each year. For example, this year, the Holy Quran in its original Arabic text was printed in a beautiful format, as was the English translation of Maulvi Sher Ali Sahib. Similarly, the split word Urdu translation of Ameer Muhammad Ishaq Sahib is being published in large numbers. Apart from this, the books of Hadith, the books of the Prophet Islam, and the Khalafa, as well as many other books, are being printed.
So as we can see that under Khilafat Ahmadiyya, the central point of the Jama'at is to propagate Islam to the corners of the earth. And as we see from the second point, which was mentioned earlier, that Khilafat changes the state of fear into peace. The community went through critical phases of its history after the demise of promised Messiah ﷺ, and after the demise of each of the previous Khulafa. Today, each Ahmadi is a living testimony to the fact that how God changed each fear into peace through Khilafat Ahmadiyya, and how he granted dignity and stability to the religion of Islam. This is a great favor of Allah, the Exalted, that the sun of Khilafat continues to shine upon all of us day and night. Let's take a look at this clip that makes this point crystal clear. This was at the time after the demise of the fourth Khalifa and at the election of Hazrat Khalifa al-Masih Khamis Ayyadullah bin Nasr al-Aziz.
أثناء أمير جماعة ألمانيا قال لرئيس المجلس فليقفوا لكي نراهم، على الأقل كل منا جاء من بلد، الذي جاء من أمريكا والذي جاء من أفريقيا والذي جاء من الهند ومن باكستان ومن دول مختلفة، وأصلا نحن لا يعرف بعضنا بعضا. فعندما وافق رئيس المجلس فبدأ يقول يسمي الأسماء ليقفوا. عندما قال مسرور أحمد فنظرت أمامي لم أجد أحد، وإذ هو يجلس في المربع الذي كنت أجلس به في الخلف، فنظرت وإذ بهذا الرجل الذي مر من أمامي وخرج منه النور، قلت هذا هو إذن خليفة الوقت. وعندما جاء موعد الانتخاب رفعت يدي فرأيت الجميع أو الأغلبية الساحقة كانت قد رفعت يدها تأييدا لاسم ميرزا مسرور أحمد، وتحول الهم والغم والقلق. فعلا عشنا لحظات يبدلنهم من بعد خوفهم أمنا. هذا ما أقوله، نحن في الجماعة الإسلامية الأحمدية لا نعيش فكرة، لا نقرأ فقط أمور جافة، نحن نعيشها بأنفسنا. هذا هو الإله الحي، هذا هو الدين الحي الذي يجعل أفراده يعيشون هذه الآيات بأنفسهم ويرون المعجزات ويرون كيف أن المستحيل يصبح ممكنا. فنحن خليفتنا هو خليفة الله، هو اختيار الله، هو رجل الله.
Jazakumullah. Over here we see that Ameer Sahib Kabir is narrating that incident where everyone had come from a different country, so they did not know who each other was. And so when the chairman said Masroor Ahmed, he said, I looked in front of me and did not see anyone. I looked well at him and realized this is the person who passed in front of me, and a ray of light came out of him. When it came to time to vote, I raised my hand. I saw the majority raise their hands to vote for Mirza Masroor Ahmad Ayyadullah bin Nasir al-Aziz. And the fear, worry, and anxiety turned into peace as experienced by everybody there. Lastly, the point that was made is Khilafat will establish the unity of God. Hazrat Khalifatul Masih Ayyadullah bin Nasir al-Aziz continues to emphasize and explain oneness of God and his worship. Let's take a look at this clip of Hazur Anwar Ayyadullah bin Nasir al-Aziz.
याद रहे कि हकीकी तौहीद जिसका इकरार खुदा हमसे चाहता है और जिसके इकरार से निजात वाबस्ता है, ये है कि अल्लाह ताला को अपनी ज़ात में हर एक शिर्क से खा बूत हो, खा इंसान हो, खा सूरज हो या चाँद, या अपना नफ्स या अपनी तदबीर और मकर फ़रेब को मुनज़्ज़ह समझना और उसके मुकाबल पर कोई कादर तजवीज़ ना करना, कोई राज़िक ना मानना और कोई मुइज़ और मुज़िल ख्याल ना करना, कोई इज़्ज़त देने वाला और किसी को ज़लील करने वाला क्या ख्याल ना करना कि इन लोगों से मेरी इज़्ज़त और ज़िल्लत वाबस्ता है, बल्कि सिर्फ़ और सिर्फ खुदा ताला पे ही इन बातों का इंसार हो। बस ये चीज़ है जो इस्लाम की बुनियादी शर्त है, जो अहमदियत और हकीकी इस्लाम की बुनियादी शर्त है।
Now, moving on to the responsibility of the Khalifa to make sure the rights owed to man are fulfilled. Anyone that has least bit of knowledge regarding Hazrat Khalifatul Masih Ayyadullah bin Nasir al-Aziz knows his continuous effort for global peace and justice. His book titled World Crisis and Pathway to Peace is more than enough to mention at this time. In regards to instilling the spirit of giving precedence to faith over worldly matters, in almost every sermon and address of Hazrat Khalifatul Masih that you listen to, this point is brought up for the believers to understand. Hazrat Khalifatul Masih Ayyadullah bin Nasir al-Aziz stated to the office holders at many times, and he said, office holders of all levels should appreciate that their responsibility to fulfill giving precedence to faith or worldly matters is more than others. They have been made responsible to attain this objective, and for this there's a great need that they should enhance their level of sacrifice.
Jazakallah for explaining that the role of Khilafat in such great detail. You know, a lot of great points were brought up to you by you, and but you mentioned something particularly interesting. We saw in that video of Sharif where he speaks how Allah Ta'ala put into the hearts of those who were there to elect Khalifa al-Masih. So Marabi Sahib, I would kind of like to call on you to, if you can further expand on this point, that how do we truly know Khilafat is divine?
Yes, Qaid Sahib, this is, at the end of the day, this is one of the most important questions when we are talking about Khilafat, that is Khilafat divine? Because if we establish this, that Khilafat is divine, then that means that the Khalifa, he's an individual that is unique, different than any sort of other worldly leader, any sort of, icon in society, any sort of influencer. He becomes unique, and that status or that rank is clearly seen. So just to set it up, I would like to, mention a hadith, a saying of the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which will kind of set the stage. So the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam stated, there had not been any prophethood which was not succeeded by Khilafat. So we can just mull that over, think about what that means. So now we will go to the words of the promised Messiah, والسلام, that man who came as the Messiah, the Mahdi, who was foretold by the Holy Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and who was a prophet of God. So this is the words of Mirza Ghulam Ahmad al-Islam, who was a prophet of God. He states, I came from God as a manifestation of divine providence. and I am a personification of his, meaning God's power. And after I am gone, there will be some other persons who will be the manifestation of the second power of God. So while waiting for the second manifestation of his power, you all together keep yourselves busy praying, and let a Jama'at of righteous people, one and all, in every country keep themselves busy in prayers, so that the second manifestation may descend from the heaven and show you that your God is such a mighty God. And then he states, and that second manifestation cannot come unless I depart. But when I depart, God will send that second manifestation for you, which shall always stay with you, just as promised by God in Brahim Ahmadiyya. And this promise is not for my person. Rather, the promise is with reference to you. As God addressing me says, I shall make this Jama'at, who are your followers, prevail over others till the day of judgment. Thus, it is inevitable that you see the day of my departure, so that after that day, the day comes, which is the day of everlasting promise. So this is the everlasting promise, which the Prophet ﷺ, the Prophet of God, has told us about. And I would just like to close with a excerpt, a saying of Hazrat Muslim Maud anhu, regarding Khilafat and it being divine. So Hazrat Muslim Maud anhu states, there is no doubt, he states, there is no doubt that they, the Khulafa or the Khalifa, will be the ones speaking. Their tongues will be the ones moving, their tongues will be moving. Their hands will be in motion, their minds will be working. However, behind all of that will be the hand of God.
Jazakallah Marisa for providing insight into that. You know, I think oftentimes when we're discussing this topic of Khilafat, you know, being divinely appointed by Allah Ta'ala, a question that also arises during that conversation is, you know, why did Allah Ta'ala establish Khilafat if he had already sent down a perfect prophet, you know, the Holy Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and the perfect book as well, the Holy Quran? Oftentimes our non-Ahmadi friends ask this. And so a similar question was posed to Khalifa Rabi, Rahmullah Ta'ala, and he sheds light on this topic. So I'd like us to take a look at that now.
When you say the prayer 5 times a day in the mosque, how is it performed? There has to be an Imam. And it is behind that Imam that the unity of the people who have gathered there is established, otherwise there can be no unity. And that is why there is so much emphasis in the Holy Quran on congregational prayers. And the importance of Imam is so great that even if Imam commits a mistake, the instruction is that all the followers of that Imam, knowing that he has committed a mistake, should repeat the mistake behind him. How better could the need for the Imam and unity of the people be emphasized than this? So if there has to be an Imam in the mosque, in a small community, how can you conceive an Ummah without an Imam? This also indicates that it is highly important for the Muslim Ummah to remain one and united under one Imam. If that was not the purpose, then there should not have been any Khilafat. Because at the time of Rasulullah's demise, Muslims were in a far better state, spiritually and religiously and in every other respect as well, than the Muslims of today. If they needed an Imam to follow, how can we do without an Imam today? Why, we need it much more. So that is as far as the need of Khilafah is concerned. I think that should be sufficient.
Jazakallah. You know, Khalifa Rabi makes a really interesting point at the end of that clip, right? That he compares the state of the Muslim Ummah immediately after the demise of the Holy Prophet ﷺ, state of the Ummah today. And Madhun Sahib, you know, when I look at the state of the Ummah today, I see that the Ummah is divided into different sects. I see that the true teachings of Islam are being forgotten. So Munsab, how does Khilafat address these issues today?
See, Jazakallah, you know, this question is actually addressed by Allah Ta'ala himself in the Holy Quran from Surah Al-Imran, verse 104, where Allah Ta'ala states that, and hold fast all together by the rope of Allah and be not divided. And remember the favor of Allah which He bestowed upon you when you were enemies, and He united your hearts in love, so that by His grace you became as brothers. So in this verse, our attention is brought to the degradation of the Israelites first. Allah Ta'ala warns the Muslims that if they split up, they're also in danger of degradation. When we think of the use of the word rope, we can think of it as a saving grace. A rope is thrown to save the life of a drowning man. What other possible thing can unite and make believers like brothers other than an Imam or a leader who's like a spiritual father? Thus, Khilafat is that rope today. By uniting under the Khalifa and pledging allegiance to him, we will also be saved from disunity and misguidance, inshallah. Lastly, it is important to note here that this rope leads directly to Allah Ta'ala, since He is the one that bestowed it. That is why we must ensure that every action of ours is in complete obedience to Hazrat Khalifatul Masih, Ayyadullah Ta'ala bin Nasrul Aziz, because it is then that we will achieve nearness to Allah.
It's such a beautiful verse, Munsab, and Jazakallah for bringing our attention to that. You know, truly, as you said, Khilafat is that saving grace. You know, we look around the world today and, you know, we see, unfortunately, many people are moving away from God. And if people are moving away from God, then they certainly are not seeking Khilafat either, because Khilafat is a secondary objective. And Hazrat Masih Maud has spoken about this and has mentioned how unfortunate these people are who are moving away from Allah Ta'ala. I'll read out the excerpt from Noah's Ark. He writes, "How unfortunate is the man who even now is unaware that there is a God who has power over all things. Our paradise lies in our God. Our highest delight is in our God, for we have seen Him and found every beauty in Him. This wealth is worth procuring, though one might have to lay down one's life to procure it. This ruby is worth purchasing, though one may have to lose oneself to acquire it. O ye who are deprived, hasten to this fountain, and it will satiate you. It is this fountain of life that will save you. What am I to do? How shall I impress the hearts with this good news? What sort of drum am I to beat in the streets in order to make the announcement that this is your God, so that people might hear? What remedy shall I apply to the ears of the people so that they should listen?" And it is without a doubt that Khilafat Ahmadiyya is that real manifestation of Hablullah, that rope of Allah that Muhtaram Sahib drew our attention to in that verse. We see from its establishment that Allah Ta'ala has always listened to the Khalifa's prayers, and by the grace of Allah Ta'ala, Jama'at Ahmadiyya still witnesses the miraculous acceptance of prayers of the Imam of this age, Hazrat Khalifatul Masih al-Khamis, Ayyahudullah Ta'ala bin Nasrul Aziz. We have a video clip of Abdul Majid Tahir Sahib, and he narrates a very inspiring story of a missionary who became dangerously ill in Niger, and he was on the brink of death, but with the prayers of Khalifatul Masih, he was basically breathed into a new life. So if we could play that clip really quickly.
बताया कि जो मुर्दों की तरह बीमार हों उनको कसरत दुआ से ज़िंदा कर देता है। तो एक छोटा सा वाक़या मैं बयान करता हूँ कि ज़िंदा खुदा की तजल्लियात आज भी खिलाफत अहमदिया के ज़रिए मुल्क मुल्क करिया करिया ज़ाहिर हो रही हैं। नाइजर में, ये नाइजर का वाक़या है, वहाँ हमारे एक मुबल्लिग बीमार हो गए और हालत ये हुई कि उनके ब्रेन में एक क्लॉट आ गया था और वो कोमा में चले गए, बेहोश हो गए और कोमा में चले गए। 4-5 दिन इसी हालत में गुजरे। हुजूर की खिदमत में उनकी रिपोर्ट रोज़ाना पेश होती थी। हुजूर उनकी सेहत के लिए दुआ करते, शफा याबी के लिए दुआ करते और हुजूर ने हदायत फरमाई एक ख़ास दवाई की, होम्योपैथी की, कि ये दवाई जाकर उनको दी जाए। नाचे वो दवाई नाइजर में मुहैया नहीं थी, तो साथ वाले मुल्क बुर्किना फासो से एक हमारे अहमदी डॉक्टर हैं, उनको वो दवाई देकर वहाँ भेजा और वो उस वक़्त इंतहाई निगहदाश्त के वार्ड में थे, आम आदमी वहाँ जा भी नहीं सकता था। तो वो डॉक्टर साहब जो हमारे अहमदी डॉक्टर थे वो दवाई लेकर गए और उन्होंने उनके होंठों पे, शाम का वक्त था, कोई चौथा या पाँचवा दिन था, शाम का वक्त था, तो उन्होंने वो दवाई जाकर उनके होंठों पे लगाई। वो डॉक्टर साहब खुद बयान करते हैं कि जो ही मैंने वो दवाई लगवाई उसके जिस्म में एक हरकत हुई और उसने आंखें खोली और अगले दिन वो मरीज़ जो एक मुर्दा की तरह बीमार था उठ के बैठ गया और बातें करने लगा। तो ये है वो मौइज़ा जो आज भी, जो हमारा जिंदा खुदा है, वो आज भी खलीफा वक्त की ज़ुबान से बोलता है और आज भी अपनी तजलियात के नज़ारे दिखाता है।
For playing that. Ameer Sahib, unfortunately, we weren't able to get the subtitles for that, but we do have the translation.
Yeah,
so I'll
please.
request respected Rabbi Sahib to please read the translation.
Yes, so a translation of the incident just mentioned by Majid Tahir Sahib is as follows. So he states, "Let me share an incident which shows that the manifestations of the living God are still with Khilafat Ahmadiyya." He states, "In Niger, one of our missionaries became very sick. There was a blood clot in his brain and he went into a coma. 4 to 5 days passed and there was not much hope for him. Every day a report of his health was presented in front of Hazur Anwar, Ayatollah ibn Aziz. Hazur would pray for him and he prescribed a certain homeopathic medicine which should be given to him. This medicine was not available in Niger, so an Ahmadi doctor from neighboring Burkina Faso came with it. The Ahmadi doctor came in the evening on the 4th or the 5th day, since the missionary was in a coma in that state. So the Ahmadi doctor came and put that medicine on the lips of the missionary. The doctor himself states, right when I put the medicine on his lips, his body began to move and he opened his eyes. And the very next day, that man who was practically a corpse got up and started to talk. These are the miracles that show the living God still speaks and shows manifestations of his being through the Khalifa of the time."
You know, this video is just one of millions of testimonies to the blessings of Khilafat. And there's absolutely no doubt that Khalifatul Masih, Ayyadullah Ta'ala bin Nasr Aziz, is truly a blessing for us all. The care and love that a Khalifa has for his Jama'at is unmatched by any other worldly relationship. And it's unthinkable to even imagine being the caretaker of millions of Ahmadis around the world. Once Hazrat Muslim radiallahu ta'ala anhu actually shed light on this subject. He delivered a khutbah, a khutbah called the Blessings of Khilafat. In that khutbah, he explained how heavy this burden is. He said, "There are things which only I can tell. Nobody knows how heavy is the weight of the responsibility that I have been asked to bear. There are days when I feel that I would die even before sunset. There are days when I feel that I would die even before sunset. On such occasions, I say to myself, I should continue to work so long as I am living, and after my demise, God will raise someone else in my place. My worry about the work that God has assigned to me will last only until the time I am living. Therefore, I worry least about what would happen after I have passed away. This movement has been initiated by God Almighty, so He Himself will look after it." And this is just something that every Ahmadi should ponder over. Every one of us who are listening, alhamdulillah, we started off at 400, but now we're over 600 viewers right now. And you know, who do you think that Khalifatul Masih Ayyadullah Ta'ala bin Nasr Aziz is working so hard for? We are the ones who are lining up for mulaqat. We are the ones who are sending thousands of letters a day to Khalifatul Masih and even expecting a response back from him. We are the ones who, when we fall into difficult times, are asking Khalifatul Masih for prayers. But the question is what are we doing for the institution of Khilafat? And so before we end, I think it's important for us all to take a self-assessment of ourselves and of our bath. And I'm going to pose 3 questions on the screen. And in your heart, you know, there's no need to blurt this out. I just want us to answer this truthfully in our hearts. And the first question is do I listen to the Friday sermon more than once a week? Hazrat, I was reading the diary of Abid Khan Sahib, and he mentioned there that Khalifatul Masih, before his Khilafat, would listen to the Friday sermons of Khalifa Rabi 3 to 4 times a week, just so he could truly understand the words of the Khalifa of the time. And then the second question is do I pray Nafil and Tahajjud regularly? You know, after his Friday sermons, Hazuri Anwar Aidullah bin Nasir Aziz constantly reminds us to pray for the situations around the world, for the state of the Ahmadis. And are we truly doing this? Are we reading our 5 daily salat even? You know, are we reading those on time? And are we truly pondering in our salat and praying to Allah Ta'ala in those? And then the last question is have I done wasiyat? You know, Hazuri Anwar almost almost 20 years ago requested all the, had a desire that the Jama'at, that the earning members of the Jama'at, 50% of them join into this blessed Nizam. Have we settled back to the call of Khalifatul Masih? And unfortunately, our numbers just don't show that. And so it's just something that really we have to reflect on. You know, Khalifatul Masih is out there praying for us and constantly worrying about us, but are we fulfilling our bats? And so in the end, I think it's natural that we end with the words of our beloved Imam, Ayyadullah Ta'ala bin Nasir Aziz. In this last clip, Huzur explains how the world desires Khilafat, but Allah Ta'ala has only blessed Jama'at Ahmadiyya with this institution. So let's take a look and end our presentation here, please.
ये लोग जैसा कि मैं बता रहा था कि गैर कोशिश करते हैं कि हम में भी खिलाफत कायम हो, इसकी ज़रूरत को महसूस करते हैं, लेकिन इनमें ये कायम नहीं हो सकती क्योंकि ये अपनी मर्ज़ी से उसकी तारीफ़ करना चाहते हैं, बजाय अल्लाह ताला की खिलाफत लेने के अपनी खिलाफत ठोंसना चाहते हैं। बस ये किस तरह हो सकता है कि उनके खौफ की हालत अमन से बदले? ये किस तरह हो सकता है कि उनमें खिलाफत का निज़ाम कायम हो? ये अल्लाह ताला का इनाम है। अल्लाह ताला इस निज़ाम के तहत जहाँ मोमिनों के खौफ की हालत को अमन में बदलता है, वहाँ अपने मुकर्रर करदा खलीफा के दिल से हर किस्म के दुनियावी खौफ निकाल कर खौफ की हालतों का मुकाबला करने की ताकत अता फरमाता है। हर मुश्किल हालत में अपने फजल से तसल्ली देता है ताकि खलीफा वक्त जमात को तसल्ली दे। बस क्या दुनियावी तदबीरें इलाही तदबीरों का मुकाबला कर सकती हैं?
That's the end of presentation.
Ameer said that's the end.
Very short presentation for that important topic, huh? Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Again, I understand, obviously, the intent of Majlis Khuddamul is to have a discussion about Munsab-e-Khilafat. But I look at it after listening to Hazrat Masih Maud alayhi salam, who is the prophet of this time, and his Khalafa, and earlier than that, the Quranic tiding of blessing of establishment of Khilafat in his chosen people, and the hadith about the Khilafat in the latter days. I think I don't see any reason for me to say anything. What we need to do is that reflect upon what we heard and see how much we understand about it. The main question every one of us has to answer is, do I understand the status of Khilafat? And if I don't, then there is obviously an issue what it will take for a person to understand about any issue. You have to understand the importance of any issue under discussion before you realize its importance of lack of it, or how precious it is in our lives. So we talked about and we listened to Khalafa and their connection with the Jama'at. But the main question is for those who have doubts how the Majlis Khuddamul Ahmadiyya can engage and make them understand about the importance of Khilafat. Because unless we understand the true nature of the institution of Khilafat, we will not be able to understand its stature, its status. So that is the most important thing. It's for everything. It's not only for Khilafat. In our daily lives, we have to be convinced if something is important for us before we can guard it or take care of it or follow it. So that's the question of the day, I think, is how we should make ourselves be convinced that this is a divine blessing that is given to us without any of our efforts. And we are so blessed to be in this in Jama'at, to take part or to be under the Khilafat, institution of Khilafat. And when we talk about safeguarding it, and some people say, well, if Allah Ta'ala appoints the Khalifa, then he would safeguard it. Why we are there to safeguard? I think they miss the point. Is it's not physically safeguarding the Khilafat that we can do. It is Sunnah, it's the Allah Ta'ala's Sunnah. It is the law of nature that if we do not take care of the favors that God has given us, or any divine favor, then they are taken away from us. That does mean that it is, and that if you read different lectures or writings of Khalifa Ahmadiyya, that's what is meant, is to protect it, keep it close to our chest, protect it with every being of our fiber, in the sense that we treasure it. We understand it, how precious it is to our survival, our spiritual survival. And that's the only way we can appreciate the true status of Khilafat. We have to connect it in a way that it could become a personal connection. Just like a connection between a son and a father, or a daughter and the father and the mother. A connection or passion with something or somebody that we treasure so much in our lives. By just repeating a few words about status of Khilafat, and yes, we believe in Khilafat, and our actions is not, if not contradicting it, at least is not supporting it in a sense that we truly mean what he's saying, taken point about the three things that were mentioned in the last slide about al-wasiyat. And after Hazrat Masih Maud alayhi salam wrote a will to his Jama'at, and we have talked about it many times before, almost 117 years ago. And then 17 years ago, Hazrat Khalifatul Masih drew our attention to this important scheme and asked the Jama'at that 50% of the earning members should join Nizam-e-Wasiyat. Now, if we truly appreciate the status of Khilafat, would we walk away with that reminder and not follow or try to follow? I mean, that's the question. It's a very simple question. After all the speeches and slideshows and discussions, the underlying point is, are we following Khalifatul Masih, the Khalifa of our time, the way we should? And I can't answer for anybody else. I have to answer for myself. I have to reflect myself and see how many times I listen to him and then try to obey the command of my Khalifa that I so often say, he's my spiritual head, he's my beloved Huzur. I can do everything what he asked me to do. But when it really matters, when the commandment comes from Hazrat Khalifatul Masih, then we start finding some excuses, some reasons to delay our obedience, our actions. So that is the main question I think we need to ask each one of us. And for the Majlis Khuddamul Ahmadiyya, it is a tremendous task how those young men can be connected to the institution of Khilafat. How can we convince them the importance of this divine favor? And once that is achieved, it is automatic. It is just normal to understand the true status of the Khalifa. When we understand it comes from God, and if we believe in God, then it's not very difficult. But the first point we have to understand, do we believe in God? It all comes down to the discussion a couple of weeks ago, God's Summit, because the verses which were recited earlier on, and you can put on the screen, you say, obey God and his messenger. Before the ayat is taqlab, where God gives us this glad tidings, he is commanding us to obey him and his messenger. But if you turn away, then upon you is your burden. So that means that God who established the Khilafat, true Khilafat, by not realizing it, by not connecting with it, by not obeying the Khalifa of the time, we are indirectly disobeying Allah and his messenger. We can interpret whatever way we want. And they say, why we can't question Khalifa Masih? Well, the point is, yeah, if you want to question it, then question Allah before you question Khalifatul Masih. question Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam before you question Khalifatul Masih. You question Masih Maud alayhi salam before you question Khalifatul Masih. It is as simple as that. And there is no ifs or buts about it. Because at the end he says, think not those who disbelieve can frustrate our plan in the earth. And the last line, I'm not, I'm missing here, but they're Umul Fasikun. So that is that who are ungrateful and will be the rebellious. So that is what the state of those people who disbelieve or question Khilafat, whether it was Khilafat-e-Rashida or it's Khilafat-e-Ahmadiyya. And that's very frightening and sobering thought. If we believe in Allah, it all depends. Our faith in our religious philosophy. As a Muslim, as an Ahmadi, as a believer, this is very clear to us. Obey Allah and obey the Messenger. And as a result, you will be given this favor, divine favor of Khilafat. And 3 points in Quran, Allah Ta'ala mentions Khilafat about Hazrat Adam, Hazrat Dawood. And in this verse, he clearly states that it is Allah who appoints, is the Allah who makes Khalifa, not the people. So when the action points towards Allah, then the questioning or commenting or criticizing his appointee is indirectly appointing the decision of Almighty God. Well, there might be some people who think they're very smart, even though they have no power on themselves. They are here because God willed them to be here or born here. But you find many people who are willing to question it. But for those who believe in Allah Ta'ala, it's very clear for us that Allah Ta'ala, the Supreme Being, is the one who appoints Khalifa, and his judgment should not be and cannot be questioned. And those who do that, if you ask me, truly are not believer in Allah Ta'ala or his prophet. Some people say I'm Ahmadi, but I have a question about this decision of Khalifatul Masih or that decision of Khalifatul Masih. But I think that person should first question about their own integrity or their statement that they are Ahmadi. Well, it's not a dictatorship, they would say. Yes, it's not. But when you take a bath, and you say that I will obey you, then you're turning on your words. That's why I say your integrity. They have every right to walk away. But to be associated with and then questioning it, I think they should be questioned about it. That's all I have to say here.
Jazakallah. Ameer Sahib, if you allow, we would like to do a question answer session if you allow us.
Sure. We still have 25 minutes to go, I think, 24 minutes.
Ji, Ameer Sahib.
Yeah, if somebody interested.
Okay.
Jazakallah, Ameer Sahib. So we'll now move over to the Q&A. I will quickly go over the instructions just as a recap. If anybody would like to ask a question, please try to stay on topic that we're talking about today, Munsab-e-Khilafat, which is status of Khilafat. And you can use the raise hand feature on Zoom and remain close to your phone or the computer so we will announce your name and then we can allow you to go ahead and unmute yourself and then ask your question. So please be respectful of your time and, just making sure that the question is short and sweet so we can try to get as many questions in as possible. We'll now go ahead and take live questions. And we do have some questions coming in from the chat box as well. So I'll try to alternate. And also we may have some questions here in the audience here in Masjid Rahman, where Khuddam, Waqfina Khuddam are sitting. And then also in our other two locations. So we'll also go there if there's any questions. Ameer Sahib, I'd like to start with the first question that I saw in the chat box. Someone asked that, why would we question Allah or the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam before the Khalifa?
Why do we question Allah?
Is that the questioner says, why would we question Allah or the Holy Prophet before the Khalifa? So before Khalifa, why should we question Allah? Or if we were to question, our line of questioning, why should we question Allah if we, before they question Khalifatul Masih?
Could you, I'm sorry, apologize, but I did not really follow. Can you explain to me?
I'm just reading the question as it came in. I hope the person who's asking, if you would like to come live, we can take you live.
What do you understand? Yeah, I apologize my ignorance, but
I think Ameer Sahib, maybe the questioner is asking that we can question Khalifa, but maybe we shouldn't be questioning Allah or the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And why should we question them before we question Khalifa? Maybe the person is not realizing that connection of Khilafat.
I just answered that, didn't I?
Ji, you did.
If you believe that Khalifa is appointed by Allah Ta'ala and is according to his glad tidings, just the verse we have said, I just was recited, then questioning the Khalifa is questioning the Prophet and Allah Ta'ala. I mean, this is all connected. That's why I said it. You can say we don't believe in Khilafat. That's fine. There are 101.6 billion Muslims who don't. And, we were talking about why we need a Khalifa, and the simple answer is, proof is in the pudding. Look at them, what the state of that the rest of the Muslims are. So basically, that's the answer is that if you believe existence of God, and if you believe that Islam is the true religion, if one is believed that Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was his prophet, his last prophet, if you believe that Masih Maud Mirza Ghulam Ahmad Qadiani is the Messiah that was prophesied in the scriptures of the past, then we must believe that Nizam-e-Khilafat in Jama'at is truly a divine system. And anybody at any time who is Khalifa of the time is the man of God is appointed by him. And to not obey him is akin to not obey to God. Now, some people may argue about it, but that's how I believe, with the connection that I have just described. You know, if you get a knock at the door and a person from the staff of your senator or your local congressman comes at the door and says that I have been told by the President of the United States to give you this message. And I, in turn, tell him that, no, I have a question about your statement. Especially when he give him the letter from the President of the United States. Not many people will do that. They will bring him in, they will give him a cup of coffee and entertain him, and they will be happy and flying high that the President of the United States has called upon this person, and send them the letter to invite to White House. But the Khalifa gives you a message, you start questioning it. Yes, sir.
Jazakallah, Ameer Sahib. We'll go to a live question now. I'll ask Haris Ahmed Sahib. Please go ahead and unmute yourself and you may ask your question. Haris Ahmed Sahib. If Haris Ahmed Sahib is not there, we have a question from Muhammad Awusu Sahib. Please, you can unmute yourself and ask your question. On the screen, it will allow you to unmute and you can ask. In the meantime, go ahead.
I don't have a question. I just want to corroborate what Ameer Sahib just said. I think for me, the other question the guy asked that Ameer Sahib had answered kind of boils down to the concept of maruf. And it's very difficult for me personally, I'm not an Islamic scholar, to understand when somebody says you have to follow the Khalifa in everything unless it's not maruf. Because we don't have, from my knowledge, we don't have any instance where anybody challenges the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam or his Khulafa. So I don't know what exactly when somebody says, I'm going to follow the Khalifa unless it's maruf. How do you define maruf? Right?
Maruf is everything which is
who sets the standards? So like, I don't believe in the Khalifa.
Maruf is everything which is in accordance with the Quran and the Sharia and the saying of and the Sunnah, and according to the common sense. And the Khalifatul Masih Sani, when he first or second speech, one of the speeches after Khilafat, he said that if I tell you, you have to follow me in all things maruf. You have to. But if I tell you that don't obey God, you will not follow me. If I tell you that you don't obey Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you will not follow me. If I tell you that this is the Quranic injunction, the Quranic commandment, you don't follow this particular commandment, you will not follow me. I have the, don't have right, I'm paraphrasing, but these are the words, and Rabbi Sahib can file out. It is from Khalafa ala Minhaj an-Nubuwah, Jild Awwal, and first couple of chapters. So this is what maruf is. The point is that if Khalifatul Masih tells me something, do I have more spiritual knowledge and religious moral knowledge to tell him that what you're telling me is not maruf? That's why I'm not going to follow you. Do we tell our school teachers what you're teaching me, the scientific principles, I'm not going to follow because I don't think they are true? None of them dare to do so because you know the consequences. You don't challenge law of natures, you know, I mean, you don't even challenge some, you know, people like us, unless you have some kind of a status in scientific world. You don't challenge even theories like this theory of relativity, unless you prove yourself that you have proven that theory wrong. So this is all is kind of a discussion or an excuse not to do something. Or not to obey the Khilafat. That's what I'm saying is that there is no way to do. Either you are a true, if you are a true Ahmadi or true believer of God's commandment and truthfulness of our Masih Maud alayhi salam, then you have to believe in Khilafat Ahmadiyya and you follow the Khalifa. Your personal objections, your personal desires, your personal knowledge should not come into play or discussion in your decision-making process. And so anything that Khalifatul Masih says, you know, I mean, if you don't believe something, I know some people are going to give me some examples here. They may not, but they would think about it. Something the Khalifatul Masih says about his opinion. Case in point, in Facebook. Years ago, he talked about Facebook. And people say, well, some people obeyed him and some continue to use Facebook. And if a question was raised again in one of the meetings, and another subject, which I think personally is not good for Ahmadis, I will continue to say that it is up to you guys whether you take it or not. But there is no need for discussion of that. And what happened in 5 years later, don't have to go in details. Anybody who reads the news and follow knows what Facebook's all about. Then he talked about send a letter that just to kind of make the people aware about this cryptocurrency. And there was a hoopla, there's some forums on social media started, what he knows about. He just said that some people have taken a loss, so I advise members to be careful. That was the words. And it is, according to the Sharia, it is not a good thing, it's kind of a betting. Now, I don't know much about Sharia, so I have no problem. I mean, I don't want to question it. But on the other part, anybody who is investing it in Bitcoins saw the latest dip in there, how many people lost. But that's your personal decisions. If you don't follow it, fine, don't follow it. But there is no need to be engaging in discussions and trying to prove that you are the smartest man on their social media and you know everything, while people who know more than you do are laughing at how foolish you are. But they won't tell you on your face. Anyway, people may be thinking something when I'm saying that. So anyway.
We have Rabi Shahad Saab online who have the reference that Ameer Sahib you had mentioned.
Okay, you can read it in Urdu.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. हुजूर ने फरमाया तुम्हें अमर बिल मारूफ में मेरी इताअत और फरमाबरदारी करनी होगी। अगर नाउजुबिल्लाह कहूँ कि खुदा एक नहीं तो उसी खुदा की कसम देता हूँ जिसके कब्ज़े कुदरत में हम सब की जान है, जो वहदहू ला शरीक और लैसा कमसलिही शैउन है, कि मेरी ऐसी बात हरगिज ना मानना। अगर मैं तुम्हें नाउजुबिल्लाह नबुव्वत का कोई नक्श बताऊं तो मत मानियो। अगर कुरान करीम का कोई नक्श बताऊं तो फिर खुदा की कसम देता हूं मत मानियो। हजरत मसीह मऊद अलैहिस्सलाम ने जो खुदा ताला से वही पाकर तालीम दी है उसके खिलाफ कहूं तो हरगिज हरगिज ना मानना। हाँ, मैं फिर कहता हूं और फिर कहता हूं कि अमर मारूफ में मेरी खिलाफ वर्जी ना करना। अगर इताअत और फरमाबरदारी से काम लोगे और इस अहद को मजबूत करोगे तो याद रखो अल्लाह ताला का फजल हमारी दस्तगीरी करेगा।
जी, anybody wants to translate, that's fine, but this is basically what Amr bil Maruf is. And Amr bil Maruf Amr bil Maruf according to the Sharia, and again Shamshad Sahab can explain it, and Amr bil Maruf bil Aql. So two types of Amr bil Maruf. It was the Aql, the wisdom says, and the one is the Sharia says.
Jazakallah, Ameer Saab. We'll take a live question, and then I'll request anybody in the room, if they have a question, they can also line up behind a microphone, and then inshallah we'll come to you next. Next we have Maryam Khanam Saiba. Please go ahead and unmute yourself, and you can ask your question. If Maryam Saab is not there, we have next is Fiza Saiba. We'll unmute you, and you can unmute yourself and ask your question. It takes a couple of minutes to unmute. So our next, okay, go ahead. Fiza Saiba, you can ask your question.
Sorry, I didn't raise my hand.
Okay. Next we have Nasreen Akhtar Sahiba. If you can unmute yourself and you can ask your question.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Jannat Iman, and my question is, when a Khalifa is made, why do we still have to celebrate Khilafat Day, and what is Khilafat Day?
Walaikum salam. What's this question?
My question is, what is Khilafat Day, and when a Khalifa is made, why do we still have to celebrate Khilafat Day?
What I understand is the Khilafat Day is just, you heard it, that it is established in 1956 and is to make the Jama'at aware of the importance of the Khilafah. Now, there might be many audience in there who did not know the history of Ahmadiyya, and as you're growing up and and those who have not studied, you have still a long life to study Ahmadiyya. You are a young kid, but those who do not know the importance of Khilafat Day is that one day in the whole year dedicated to remind us and to educate us about the importance of Khilafat. And also remind us that we should have a connection with the Khalifa, that you just say, if there is a Khalifa, why we have to do Khilafat Day? That's the important thing, to tell you that you should have a live connection and contact with Khalifa of the time.
Jazakallah khair.
Jazakallah.
Ameer Sahib, we have another question from the chat. It says, we acknowledge that Khalifa is a representative of God, but the knowledge of Islam as understood by us, if it requires us to ask questions. Why is it wrong? Not asking means remaining in the dark from the light of Islamic knowledge, which can create more distance from the functioning principles of the Jama'at.
This is a how I tell you this question. Nobody is stopping you to question, sir. Nobody. There is a way to ask these questions. If you are truly a truth seeker, if you truly want to have knowledge, and you are pure in your heart, that the only reason you are asking this question is to clarify some mistakes or some misunderstandings or gain knowledge, you can write to Khalifatul Masih directly. No question about it. Nobody is stopping you to ask questions. What we are, I didn't say even the not ask question, I said obeying it. I never mentioned don't ask questions. So I don't know how it was taken from my conversation, if it was, construed that way. But you can ask question, and you can ask question to the person who has the knowledge of. You don't go on a social media and tell that so-and-so physicist is not doing the right thing, or his theory is not right in your opinion, when you do not have the background or the knowledge about it. You write to that particular specialist that I have this dilemma, I have this question, please clarify. And this is the civil way of doing things. And you should do the same thing in religious matters. You should go to Khalifatul Masih, write to Khalifatul Masih that I have this question, please answer it. It may satisfy you or it may not. I mean, that's between you and Allah and Khalifatul Masih. But this is the way that we do normal business in the world. That you go to the source and ask the question to that person. You don't engage in useless conversation on social media to prove a point, or basically proving one's ignorance by having these kind of conversation. So you're welcome to ask the question. If it is a religious question, you can ask a Murabbi. If you're not satisfied, you can ask the Murabbi in charge. If not satisfied, you can write to Khalifatul Masih. And if your intent is to get to the bottom of the truth, perfectly fine. Nobody is saying don't ask questions. I don't know why people think that is what Jama'at or anybody has this perception that it is repressed, that you should not be asking questions.
Jazakallah, respected Ameer Sahib. We have one question that states that if respected Ameer Sahib can share any story that can inspire connection with the status of Khalifa Waqt.
There's only 1 minute left. So if anybody who, as I said it, you don't need stories, you need a live connection. Okay? So if I have what I have with the Khilafat, I have a connection with the Khalifa in the past and the present. And I have no question about it. Is that the Khalifa is appointed by God Almighty, and I obey him with every fiber of my being. That, in the past and in the present. So the point is that you have to have, every Ahmadi has to have their own connection with the Khilafah. That's the beauty of this Nizam. It is not through a middleman. It is between you, Khalifa, and Allah Ta'ala. So that is how one should strive to have this connection. And the people who have tried it and did this exercise, you can ask them, their questions were answered, their doubts were, were removed, and they become a true Ahmadi in the sense of, with their connection with the Khilafat Ahmadiyya.
Ameer Sahib, it's 7:30 now, and I want to be respectful of your time.
Okay. If you allow me, then your time, and we should stop it. That's fine. I mean, if there's an important question that you think need to be answered, then it's fine. But you know, for sake of the audience, if there is something that you think is, you know, in minds of many people, or should be clarified, then I think it is for sake of, you know, larger good, we can have few minutes, but otherwise there's no need to.
Okay, Ameer Sabji, I think we have some questions. Maybe we'll look at them and ask the pertinent questions here.
Ji, I think one question is, Ameer Sab, one person is saying, many of us have no doubt in divine nature of Khilafat and have firm allegiance, however, have conflicting opinions with murabbis or other office holders. Okay. Contacting Hazur sometimes take months. How can we go about such situations?
So what that has to do with the Khilafat? If the first statement is true, then conflicts with the Murabbi or with the Ameer or anybody else, or the whole Jama'at for that matter, doesn't matter. If my brother does something wrong to me, should I turn against my father? I mean, this is kind of a twisted logic here. Because my siblings, if somebody's siblings is not treating me well, or you know, they're teasing me or bullying me, so it has to be a fault of my father, or I should have some negative opinion of my father. Is that make sense? Does anybody in the audience agree or doesn't agree?
It makes sense to me, Ameer Sab.
That's all I need, sir.
Exactly.
So you are the president.
Ameer Sab, one question is, can you please explain why the Khilafat Ahmadiyya is only spiritual while the Khulafa after Hazrat Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam ruled the Muslim empire?
That's right. And the answer is again, Shamshad Sahib, pull out the same speech from in the same book of answer from Hazrat Khalifa to Masih Sani. So Hazrat Rasul Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam, while he's waiting for it, see how good he is now. While he's waiting, Andhra sallallahu alaihi wasallam was a spiritual as well as a ruler. He had the responsibility of the governance. That's why his Khulafa had the both roles. On the other hand, Hazrat Masih Maud alayhi salam is only the Jamali. He came in for spiritual invigoration or renewal or revival of Islam. Was not given the role of governing the world, or was not giving the government. So his Khulafa, following him, are the spiritual guide and spiritual model for us. Does that make, again, I'm using the word maybe not as eloquently as Khalifa Masih Sani said, but I hope that answered the question. It was the question that I answered. Is that correct answer? I mean, answer may not be correct, but I understood the question right.
Ji, Ameer Sahib, I think you answered it exactly. I got that. Ameer Sahib, that one question that could be our last question, which is doing wasiyat is very important, and I think everybody should do it without hesitation. but there's always that issue of not making enough money or barely making enough for basic needs. How does that person go forward with that?
Not making enough money. You just give it whatever you're making it. I don't think the 10%, giving 10% of your income will starve you to death. Is anybody in the audience think that way? Or am I wrong? Anybody who thinks by 10% giving of your income, whatever it is, would starve you to death or will take away your shelter. And if those people who are in that situation, they shouldn't be doing it. But fortunately, majority of them don't fall in that category. By the grace of God and the blessing of Ahmadiyya and the prayers of your ancestors who are sitting here, you are the most prosperous segment of society in the United States as the Jama'at. And don't take my words. Go around and see Ahmadis' families, how much they are blessed with world, material wealth and worldly possessions. If there are a small percentage, 2 or 3% who cannot afford wasiyat at this time, they should not be doing it, of course. They should wait till their situation improves and they can do it. But the vast majority of people, there is no excuse. And I told one time, a couple of years ago, I can guarantee you, and I assure you, all of those who are earning members sitting in this audience, if you do wasiyat, it will not crimp your lifestyle. It will not affect the house you're living in, the cars you're driving, and the food you're eating, and the traveling you're doing. It would not affect you. Mark my words. And if it does, don't do it. But there are so many examples that people who did it, and God bless them further, beyond their imaginations. But you have to have faith in God, and you're doing it because a prophet of God asks you to do. If the intention is that, then you will see how your life changes and how your situation improves for those who are tight financially and cannot afford it. Okay. Jazakallah. Shamshad Sahab probably couldn't get out that quote, did it?
Gee, I got it.
Okay. Could you read it just for in
Yeah.
Urdu? Maybe
जी हजरत खलीफतुल मसीह सानी रजी अल्लाह ताला फरमाते हैं, हाँ एक बात याद रखनी चाहिए कि खलीफा अपने पेशरों के काम की निगरानी के लिए होता है। इसीलिए हजरत सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम के खुलफा मुल्क और दीन दोनों की हिफाजत में मामूर थे, क्योंकि हजरत सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम को अल्लाह ताला ने दीनी और दुनियावी दोनों बादशाहतें दी थी, लेकिन मसीह मऊद अलैहिस्सलाम जिसके जरिया हजरत सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम का जमाली ज़हूर हुआ, सिर्फ दीनी बादशाह था, इसलिए उसके खुलफा भी इसी तरह के होंगे।
Jazakallah. So Khuddamul Ahmadiyya can translate that in question, and the first one which I said it before. And Jazakallah for inviting me. That's very gracious of you.
Jazakumullah, Ameer Sahib. Before we end, if we can just display the flyer. We have a Khuddam Ijtima, Majlis Khuddamul Ahmadiyya and Atfal al-Ahmadiyya Ijtima, inshallah, planned for August 19th to 21st.
Okay.
First we would like to invite you, Ameer Sahib, to join us. But also for all of the Khuddam and Atfal who are here and parents, we would like you to come as well, inshallah.
So what, as any particular theme?
Ameer Sahib, Hazur gave us the theme of a living connection with Allah.
Okay, I would also ask your Nazim Ijtima, whoever is doing it, to read the address of Khalifatul Masih Sani given, I don't know, but in one of the Ijtima in Khuddamul, I think it was 39, about the purpose, which Hazur says that, main concentration was on supports and all that. And when Hazur came in, even though the attendance were 1,200, but when Hazur came in to give the lecture, there was only 450 people. So he emphasized that they should be told what the priorities are. These ijtimas are for their spiritual, uplifting and not so much so on the games, but of course that's part of it. But anyway, I thought it's a lecture, as an address that probably Majlis Khuddamul might benefit.
Ameer said we can we'll pull out that reference and inshallah present that at the Ijtima. Ameer Sahib, Jazakallah for joining and being with us tonight. I request prayers for the Majlis and prayers for the virtual Malakat tomorrow that we're having as well with the Khuddam Waqf. If you can lead us in silent prayer to end the meeting.
We'll do the prayer. Jazakallah, everyone. Please continue prayer for the Jama'at USA and Majlis Khuddamul. And Jazakallah Shamshad Sahib for helping us out.
Jazakallah. Assalamu alaikum.